the dial gauge. So I've got one of these ones back.
Okay, I can't make it through. It's too strong.
So Piggy had roast beef.
Modern TVs, they're all the same. All the content, but nothing ever good on. Welcome back to the Electronics Inside, the show where we tear down tools, toys and appliances just to find out what's inside. In this episode, I'm going to be tearing down a TV. To be a little more specific, this is a 2015 Philips Smart TV, the 32-inch PFT5500. And this was my long-suffering TV for a long time, and it recently got superseded, and I'm more than happy to take it to bits and hope I never have to see it again. Obviously, smart TVs in the modern age have a consideration for operating system. And of course, a lot of companies have their own operating system. You've got Samsung running with their Tizen, I think is how it's pronounced, operating system. You've got WebOS from LG. You had for a brief time Firefox OS. And you've also got Android TV, which is what this shipped with. Very old version now, Android 5.1, which was Lollipop. No, it did not get any major updates, which is part of my issue with it. Right off the bat, we've got a port up the top labelled service with a single screw in it. It's not really giving me a lot to go on, I'll be honest. But before I get too carried away, let's find out what that port there, that's only got 2 wires in it, because it's not impossible. You had to disconnect that, then plug your debugging tool, whatever that is, into it. It's an LED TV, so it has nice low energy consumption. That is compared to the more traditionally backlit compact fluorescent. I think it was a global illumination though, so it didn't have like zones that could automatically dim to sort of up the contrast of the LED, whereas modern TVs do, or opposed to something like an OLED TV, which is sort of self-illuminating, so it only lights up as much as it needs to and you get fantastic contrast. One thing I will say about this TV versus the new one I've just replaced it with, this has got 4 HDMI sockets and 3 USB. It's got analog input in the form of SCART, which I know is something that doesn't exist in America. We went through this. When did we go through this? Was that the Laserdisc player? And that's basically an acronym for the French company or organisation that look after standard. It's like the collection of companies, and it spells out SCART. You've got component in, audio in, you've got an antenna connection, Ethernet connection, digital optical outlet. One of the HDMIs is audio return channel. Okay, right. So imagine you've got a nice item like a sound bar, but you've also got a DVD player or a Blu-ray player, all connected to your TV via HDMI. You don't want to have lots of HDMI inputs on your soundbar and use it like an AV receiver. So to simplify that, you can use the inputs on the TV straight from your video sources like your Blu-ray player, and the HDMI ARC audio return channel will send the audio this is receiving or playing back to an external playback device. So if you have an older receiver that's still got HDMI, you can use that just to play the output HDMI sound. Did that make sense? Okay, screws are removed. So this connector, which could have been dual purpose for the service port, actually connects to the little button and directional joystick, which is a nice little input, actually. I was fond of that. Okay, nice big hunk of plastic. Here is the chance for an Easter egg. Does anybody spot anything on there that looks familiar? I'll give you a clue. Yes, that's right. I got so cross with how this TV was functioning, I kind of assumed there had to be a default or defect with the motherboard on it. And I bought a new one when this was only about 18 months old and replaced it, hoping it was going to fix all of my woes. And it did exactly the same thing, which means it was just a really poor implementation of the software by Philips. Android at this time wasn't that bad. The hardware clearly wasn't at fault, or it was a common fault and they all had it, or Philips just did a bad job with the software. I'm sorry, that's just my opinion. If any Philips techs would like to reach out and correct me, feel free. Speakers, let's start with the speakers. They should be straightforward enough. Connectorized, nice. That appears to be a Wi-Fi antenna. Ooh, although this TV does actually have Bluetooth, and I have connected Bluetooth headphones to it in the past. It's a bit of a shame they didn't find a way of making that reach around the side to the bezel, because the Bluetooth range was a bit lacking. But that's possibly the longest antenna cable I can remember. Very dusty module here. Again, that looks like another couple of antenna. So whether these were Wi-Fi and that was Bluetooth, or they're all Wi-Fi. What do we got? MediaTek chip on there. I'm pretty sure we'll find that's a wireless controller. Interested to know what the interface is that goes across these wire though. This big loom coming across from here, that's clearly the power board, and that'll be the backlight, and this will be power multiple voltages to the motherboard. And this looks very much like, with all its differential pair traces down here, the display. Now what's really interesting is there's another connector there that's not connected, but again differential pairs right back to the CPU, which makes me think, I can't remember if there was a 4K version of this screen out at the time, or if at the certain screen size, maybe 55 inches, they had to split the display into two driver boards, maybe? Internal display connectors still often follow very common standards. So there is an internal display port, there is a DSI port, and they're very often interchangeable. So it would have been, theoretically at least, possible to swap this motherboard with a different driver with the same connector, so long as you had sort of same power requirements, same space requirements. Wi-Fi may have been an issue, but not to say it's impossible to overcome. There it is. There actually appears to be signs of water damage on that board. Well, I did buy this board second hand, so I guess it's possible the rest of the screen was destroyed by water damage. And also interesting that there's an unpopulated big connector here, and I would bet good money on that being either a satellite or a cable connector for different markets, so you can use mostly the same board, just swap or add a board there, just change the firmware that's flashed onto this. So that display connector to the board driver, the display driver. This is going to be a fairly substantial bit of mounting bracket down here. So it comes with the option to wall mount on a 100 by 100 Visa mount, but it also came with legs, and where they mount on the bottom, I mean, that was always going to be fairly substantial, wasn't it? Ooh, there is a lot of cables going down to the Philips logo. Oh, that's cool. So you got the IR receiver built into the back of the Philips logo. So this actually works as parallelogram shape, works as like a diffuser or prism to try and trap that IR signal, and brings it back up here through something not dissimilar to a light pipe where the IR receiver is. That's a lot of cores. And there's an unpopulated IC here, and I would almost say that's a transmitter and receiver module. Don't remember any like IR blaster functions in this. Maybe it was available for another product or different software or something, but yeah, it's just a lot of cores, a lot of intelligence. Ooh, don't touch. Guess what that makes me want to do? It's glued in? Yes, marvelous. Whoa, nothing about that feels good. Well, that was unnecessarily glued. And again, this is just taking that standardized port, video display port, and then breaking it down to actually drive the LCD. More of which you can just about make out under here. Ooh, fragile cables. Ah! Right. So I remember this, I'll call it a rumour from years ago, when I heard that basically 3 or 4 companies made LCD screens or the screens that are driven in TVs and things, and basically everybody buys them from those 3 or 4. And I could never remember who it was because I heard it so long ago, but this display driver right down here says LG Display Company, which is just a bit weird, don't you think? That Philips are making their own TVs, but to make them they have to buy the parts from LG. And I realise that's the same as things like a phone manufacturer where Apple still use Samsung screens and things like that. But when most of the product is a screen, do you really think they're going to sell their highest product to essentially a competition? I don't know. It's an interesting quirk of the industry, I guess. Don't want to take these off of that metal too soon because, like I said, they look fragile. So there's a set of screws around sort of appearing to hold the bezel onto the metal. Oh no, let's do the power board first. I'm thinking this connector is the backlight LEDs, which again just shows you how basic they are. There's no dimming feedback from the motherboard based on what's on screen. It's just on or off. There's nothing particularly special about this board, just outputting high current DC power to a few different voltages. In fact, it's written down here, 12 volts. There's a power on signal, 3.5 or 5 volts, which I'm guessing is programmable by a set of jumpers or something somewhere. And then the LEDs, positive and negative, doesn't tell me the voltage, but I'd be shocked if it wasn't 12 volts again. So now I think I will go through and take out all these edge screws which appear to be holding the bezel on, and we will see where to go from there. Because a lot of these screws look like they're fixed from the front through this metal. Oh. Okay. Yes, gently putting that back down. So the screen, the actual display, the LCD is, I would guess, about 2mm thick, and it's like sheet of glass. And it is hard attached to these small boards, driver boards at the bottom, or breakout boards, I think they actually are, which are adhered to the other side. So I've now got to flip this over, lay it down very, very gently, and try and prise off those breakout boards before I can separate the display from the backlight. So I'm calling these the breakout boards because they don't appear to have any intelligence about them other than some decoupling capacitors, things like that. This board was the driver. This actually actively splits the probably eDisplay port or iDisplay port into its driving hardware. So now, in theory, if I lift up the diffusion box and the backlights, I should just be left with the display on the table, which then I have no idea what to do with. Oh well. There you go, that's the light box. That's diffusing the LEDs that are the backlight onto the back of the LCD, that thing. And yeah, I don't really want to touch that again. Well played, David, what now? Does this feel like a bad idea? Just to show you, there's just nothing to it. I don't know, I feel like I'm gonna come up with some useless project that I can do with that at some point. So this black bezel here is now just held on with plastic clips. Ooh. Nice diffusion layer. Oh, well, that's weird. Also smells slightly like disinfectant too. What does that look like? This is just a very specifically etched or engraved sheet of plastic. Oh. Ah, it's the gift that keeps on giving. 1, 2. Oh, a different type of diffuser. This one's sort of a 1.5mm thicker acrylic. This is like pearlescent white rather than just the diffusion pattern. And there you go. that is the LED array, which weirdly is not what I thought it would look like. So the back of this light box is not like nice polished aluminium or something. It's just kind of taped on white plastic. So these two little standoffs that were poking up here and here are just to stop that material sort of bowing and deflecting, because that would screw up the light distribution on the back. Kind of reminiscent of what you see on street signs to the backlit, you know, like in bus stops and things. Bit disappointed with the backlight, but there you go. That's kind of more what I was expecting, to be honest. These LED strips are just fixed down to the back on little PCBs, and that's kind of interesting, actually. I wonder how challenging it would have been to have replaced these with some higher quality backlights that A, were properly dimmable, perhaps B, we could have got some variable light intensity, so go warm white, cool white. I do think this TV had a habit of being slightly overexposed. The brightness was too high. And it would have probably been nice to have had some warmer white LEDs in here. These will have to still be high CRI, high colour reproduction index lights. But that's the bulk of the TV. There's surprisingly not a lot to it. I kind of feel when I think about this TV and the fact that this is in essence the equivalent of a bad spec Android phone, because this came with 2 gig of RAM and 8 gig of eMMC storage, which in 2015 was already aged. And I would expect a white good or a home appliance to last a lot longer than a phone does of 2 years. So the idea that this was shipped with meh specs is a little bit grating. And it would be great to have seen this as a user upgradable part. So you could have updated this, keeping the bulk of the rest of the hardware in place as the TV matured. In fact, are there any TVs that come with compute modules in them? I feel like that would be a really good product if they don't exist. And if they do exist, I think I want one. I hope you found this an interesting teardown. If you've got an idea for one of your own, let me know if there are other technologies or types of TVs you might like to see torn down. Maybe a plasma, maybe go for a rear projection TV, they're not very common in the UK. Or maybe you want to see something slightly newer and see what a quantum dot looks like inside. I'm sure we can find a broken one of those somewhere that we can tear down without sacrificing a nice modern TV. Either way, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.